King Leopold II of Belgium ruled from 1865 to 1909, but his legacy stretches far beyond Europe's borders. While his public image in Belgium was often one of grandeur and progress, his most significant and infamous project, the Congo Free State, reveals a much darker story, one of extreme exploitation, unimaginable brutality, and the systematic destruction of a people and their land. In the late 19th century, European powers raced to claim African territories in what's now known as the Scramble for Africa. Leopold II set his eyes on the Congo Basin, a vast and resource-rich territory largely unclaimed by European powers at the time. But rather than making it a Belgian colony, Leopold seized the Congo Free State as his private property. With clever diplomacy, he persuaded other European leaders at the Berlin Conference in 1884 to grant him this land, arguing that he would civilize the region, end the Arab slave trade, and bring Christianity and commerce. Leopold's promises of humanitarian aid and progress were nothing but a smokescreen for his real ambition: profit. He saw the Congo's ivory, and later its rubber, as key to enriching himself and elevating Belgium on the world stage. In 1885, Leopold officially established the Congo Free State and set up a complex system of forced labor to extract resources at a massive human cost. Ivory was the first major export, driven by demand for luxury items in Europe. Under Leopold's rule, ivory was extracted through violent means. Soldiers and overseers forced villagers to gather it, often using brutal methods to make sure they complied. However, in the 1890s, the global demand for rubber skyrocketed, thanks to the boom of bicycles, automobiles, and industrial machinery. Rubber became Leopold's golden resource, and he was willing to go to any length to ensure its extraction. To enforce his rule and maximize rubber production, Leopold created a private army known as the Force Publique, composed of both European officers and forcibly conscripted African soldiers. This militia acted as the enforcers of Leopold's oppressive policies. The Force Publique was infamous for its brutality, using extreme violence to make sure villagers met their rubber quotas. For many Congolese, the penalty for resisting or failing to meet quotas was death or mutilation. The chicotte, a whip made of dried hippopotamus hide, became a symbol of Leopold's brutal regime. Villagers were beaten to death or left with lifelong scars, both physical and psychological. But the chicotte was only one weapon in the arsenal of terror that Leopold's agents employed. The most notorious and horrifying practice was the severing of hands. Soldiers were ordered to cut off the hands of villagers who failed to meet quotas as a means of punishment and to instill fear. This mutilation was not only a form of punishment, but also served a twisted bureaucratic purpose. Soldiers had to account for their bullets, so they were often required to present hands as proof that they hadn't wasted ammunition. Tragically, this sometimes led to hands being severed from both living and dead individuals, creating a horrifying tally of human suffering. The brutal enforcement of rubber quotas disrupted entire communities. Villagers, forced into labor, had little time to grow food, hunt, or care for their families. Malnutrition, starvation, and disease became widespread, further exacerbating the hardships. Families were torn apart as men, women, and even children were forced to work. Hostages were often taken to ensure that villages complied with the demands. If quotas weren't met, loved ones could be killed or maimed in retribution. Historians estimate that between 1885 and 1908, approximately 10 million Congolese people died due to the forced labor system, starvation, disease, and direct violence. This staggering number represents nearly half of the Congo's population at the time. The impact was not only on the people, but on the entire structure of Congolese society. Cultural practices, family structures, and the communities were destroyed in the pursuit of profit. Despite Leopold's efforts to keep these atrocities hidden, news began to leak out. Missionaries, such as George Washington Williams, an African-American who traveled to the Congo, were among the first to document the atrocities. He famously wrote an open letter to Leopold condemning him for crimes against humanity, one of the earliest uses of such language. One of the most prominent figures in exposing Leopold's crimes was E.D. Morel, a British shipping clerk who noticed irregularities in Congo trade records. He observed that while vast quantities of ivory and rubber left the Congo, shipments going in contained guns, chains, and military supplies. Realizing what this meant, Morel began publishing his findings, igniting a wave of activism that led to the Congo Reform Association. Morel's writings, alongside the testimonies of missionaries like William Shepherd, helped build the first major international human rights movement. Supported by influential figures like author Mark Twain and British diplomat Roger Casement, they brought worldwide attention to Leopold's atrocities. These activists used photographs, written reports, and speeches to document the suffering, building a case against Leopold and shaming him on the global stage. As evidence mounted, Leopold faced increasing pressure. He tried to dismiss the reports as lies, and he even funded propaganda campaigns to defend his rule. But the international outcry was too strong. In 1908, the Belgian government finally intervened, taking the Congo Free State out of Leopold's personal control and making it a formal colony. However, while the handover reduced some of the extreme violence, Belgian colonial rule still exploited the Congo's people and resources. The impact of Leopold's rule has left scars that continue to affect the Congo today. The forced labor, cultural destruction, and population loss created deep-rooted issues that the Congo has struggled to recover from. Decades of colonialism and subsequent exploitation of resources led to systemic poverty, underdevelopment, and conflicts that continue to shape the region's challenges. Over time, as the Congo moved toward independence, its people began reclaiming their history. Today, there is a growing awareness of Leopold's dark legacy, both in Belgium and the Congo. Statues of Leopold have been defaced or removed, and calls for reparations have grown. This chapter is now part of a broader conversation about colonialism, human rights, and historical accountability. In Belgium, some continue to struggle with Leopold's memory, as his architectural projects and public works were celebrated for years. But recently, activists and historians have worked to bring his full legacy to light, seeking to ensure that the victims of the Congo Free State are remembered and that history is not whitewashed. The story of Leopold the Exequan and the Congo serves as a dark reminder of what unchecked power and greed can bring. Yet it also speaks to the resilience of the Congolese people who have endured, survived, and reclaimed their identity and land. Today, they continue to build their future while honoring the memory of those who suffered. History's lessons remain powerful, as they help us confront past wrongs and strive for a more just and informed future.